Raise your horns high and let your spirit flow. It's the classic metal wrap-up show. Feel the rush, let the loudness grow. It's the classic metal wrap-up show.
Well, this is the CMS Wrap Up Show. I'm Ruben. We got Andrew over here, and we got Evil Keneally, believe it or not, Alan. And then we have the great Alan Niven, who I think anybody that's a rock fan knows or has heard of the name. The guy's got a book coming out, Sound and Fury, correct, Alan?
Sound and Fury. It comes from a Shakespeare quote from Macbeth.
And what's the release date? Last we spoke, I think you said June.
June 24, apparently.
Okay, gotcha. So I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit about what we were going to talk about today there, Andrew.
Oh, well, I don't really know what it is that we're going to talk about other than I know that we had a list that we were going to try to take the two Use Your Illusions and make them one album.
So
Andrew's a Dawkins fan as well, is he?
He's a Dawkins fan, and we have probably some Dawkins questions too, since you're buds with Don, though. There, Alan. So
Don and I used to live
questions.
Don and I used to live together.
Oh, so there you go. We'll have some Dawkins questions, but yeah, I guess the task was. And was it a task? I guess we'll talk a little bit about that, because the Use Your Illusions 1 and 2, I think we were trying to compile it into a 10-song album. We'll see how it went. I mean, I don't know. Was it challenging for any of you guys?
It was for me. I only got like 6 songs, I think.
Okay.
I had a busy week.
Wait.
He broke the rule.
Let me catch that up. Did Andrew say he only gets 6 songs?
Exactly. That's what he said.
Oh.
And Evil over here is the opposite.
Okay.
Why don't we start with Andrew?
Let's go with Andrew. What the hell? He broke the rules.
Let's go for it. Week, though, so I didn't really get to spend too much time with these. I know there's other songs I probably would have added, but I didn't really get to explore it.
Go for it.
So pretty much it's all the hits except the covers. That's what I stuck with. I know that's boring.
Well, what's the list? What's the
in
track list?
No order, it would be Civil War. You Could Be.
Wait.
Okay, go for it.
You've only got 6 and you haven't got them in tracking order?
Like I said,
broke the rule again.
I know, I'm terrible. I didn't have time to actually really spend on this week.
Oh.
Myself and Ruben Andrew, are well prepared, though.
Andrew, you ain't going to get a passing grade on this.
I know. I failed horribly.
All right.
Failing already.
You get half a chance here, Andrew. Look at your 6 and tell me which one opens your EP.
Okay. I'd probably open it with You Could Be Mine. That's just because that's my favorite out of all.
Okay.
And then Civil War. I would probably go with The Garden next. I kept November Rain in there just because that was like the hit. Don't Cry, the original.
Yeah, well, if you didn't put November in there, Axel would come around and kick your ass.
Right. And then my last one is Pretty Tied Up.
All right.
But now that I think about it, I might have added in.
Let me throw a couple of questions at you. Okay. Are you aware that there were 2 mixes of the entire 2 records?
Not me. I wasn't aware.
Yeah, I was unaware of that.
Yeah. Do you know who Bob Clearmountain is?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I got to say, for me, Bob Clearmountain has done some incredible work. And I was just going to talk about his sonics. He made an album with a band called Roxy Music called Avalon, which is just a masterclass in sonics and mixing. It is fabulous. Whether Roxy Music is your kind of interest or not, it's an exceptional record just to hear on a technical basis. It's really amazing. So Bob Clearmountain, for me, was, are you fucking kidding? We can get Bob Clearmountain to do the mix. I'm on board. And I kept away from the studio because I heard that Axel moved into the studio with him with a bed and started breathing down the back of his neck. And I would have loved to have heard what Bob was doing, but I went, if he's got Axel in there, he's got enough to deal with. He doesn't have a teabag hanging around going, well, I'm not, you know, whatever.
Right.
So Axel and Bob did the first mix of the whole albums. And of course, the other thing is that probably the last meaningful decision that I managed to contribute to GNR was to make sure that those were two separate records instead of one double record. Because I thought if we put out one double record, we were going to get hammered. That at a price point, and bear in mind that my attitude was that the vast majority of our following was blue collar, working class. That's who came out and embraced this band in 1988. It wasn't fucking Donald Trump with a limo full of fucking models going down to buy the new record, which he did the night it was released. I cared about the people who came out and saw us, you know, and those are people who count pennies. Money matters. And I thought if we put out a double album, that was going to be constrictive on a financial purchase basis. I was also very concerned that the content of the record, and I think Andrew's probably with me on this, the content of the record was such that we'd be hammered for being bloated, excessive. Pick your adjectives, guys, whichever ones you want to come up with. And I thought we would get hammered on that. So I prevailed on Axel. Let's do two separate albums. No one's ever done that before, which is not actually strictly true, because Jimi Hendrix did it with Electric Ladyland in the United Kingdom. But I was the only person old enough to remember that shit. So I could claim it as an original idea. No ideas are original. But anyway, it was my strongest argument to Axel, let's do it as two separate albums. And he kind of fell in love with the idea of, well, a band has never released two separate albums at the same time. So it was kind of fun. The other thing was I could sit down with a calculator and show the band members that if we sold two separate albums, we'd make more money than if we sold one double album. The finances are such that we would earn more. And I could also make the argument, people can come in and buy one album one week, buy the other album the next week. So it's not going to eat into their grocery bill. So that's why it was two albums. But Bob Clearmountain did the first mix. And Tom Zootout, the A&R man, he and I stayed out of the studio. We had fucking Bob Clearmountain. What could go wrong? tell you what went wrong. Axel moved in with a bed and breathed down the back of his neck. And finally, Tom and I get delivered DATs with the mixes on the same morning. And I got mine delivered at home. He was up at his office. And obviously I went straight into my music room, put it on a stereo, sat on the floor and waited to be absolutely blown away and have my enthusiasm and expectation met. And I sit and I'm listening to this and I'm going, wait a minute, let me start this over again. And I'm listening, and then I go forward a bit, and then I come back a bit, and then I go forward a bit, and I come back a bit. And I pick up my phone and I call Tom and I say, Tom, have you heard your DAT yet? And he said, yeah. And the tone of his voice, I knew he was hearing what I was hearing. And I said, we need to talk. And Tom got in his car and came down to the South Bay to my house, and we sat in the music room and we played through the entire album together and looked at each other and said, we got a problem. Because these mixes were so flat and unexciting, and it would have been a disaster to put those mixes out. And I'll share something with you. Tom and I actually had a little fantasy moment. We sat there and laughed and said, let's sign off on this and let everybody know that these mixes are supervised by Axel and he can get his fucking comeuppance for being an ass so often. And obviously, responsibility prevailed. And Tom and I said, well, we can't sign off on this. We've got to remix. We've got to find somebody else to do it. Clear Mountain asked for all those mixes to be destroyed. He didn't want them out or used later. I know Tom kept his DAT. I surrendered mine. And then we had the problem of, well, who the fuck? And eventually had a conversation. We decided that we'd give Bill Price a go. And you might recognize his name from an album called Never Mind the Bollocks. And Bill had gotten some really good energy into that record and into that attitude. So we thought Bill might be the right person to do it. And as it turned out, Bill was the right person. And what you hear on Use Your Illusions, the Bill Price mixes.
Nice. So sick. So it was 6, right there, Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay. And you got a little bit of feedback from Alan on
Yes.
the list, and an additional story. So there you go. Yeah. All right. So next list there, Alan. Should we move on? We'll have Evil.
Oh, I'm
tackle
going
his list.
last.
What was that?
I'm going last.
Oh, you're going. Okay, you go last. Evil, you're next.
Okay. Well, I differ from Andrew in the sense that I found about 12 songs that I would have probably kept if I had had my druthers. But if Evil Keneally was the manager in those days, Alan, I would have pulled Axel aside and told him, we got to separate these ballads, my man. Too many ballads on one album doesn't sound like GNR to my ears, especially after all that I had been through with Appetite and GNR Lies and seeing them live. So I'm going to give you the 10 songs. I whittled it down in the order that makes it the ultimate illusion for Evil. Number 1, You Could Be Mine, would be the opener of the album. The first song that I heard. Little side note, Alan, when that came out in, I believe it was June of '91 as a single to the movie, Evil was on vacation in Hawaii, and I had to take my dad. I was 13 years old. I forced my dad to find the nearest mall, in which we went inside the mall and found a music store, and I grabbed the cassette version. So I had You Could Be Mine on one side and Civil War on the other, and that whole summer until the album came out, I wore that freaking single out. that cassette single. And so You Could Be Mine would be my number one track to open the album. Number two would be Dust and Bones, classic GNR, classic Izzy, has everything I need. Some would call it album filler. I would say not. Top five
Evil,
track.
Evil, well done. Best fucking song on the fucking record, if you fucking ask me.
There you go. Number three, we would come up with something here that might have angered the record label maybe a little bit, or the sensitive types out there. But Back Off Bitch is going to be my third track to the album. Number four would be Pretty Tied Up, another song that might rattle some people, but I think is nice and aggressive. And again, I'm not the kind of guy that likes to lull around with a bunch of hogwash here. So number five, the other Izzy song I really love, 14 Years. I think it's underrated, and it kind of segues there in the middle of the album, I think, just right, because the one ballad I'm going to give Axe and the band this time is Don't Cry. I think that was the strongest ballad on the album, in my opinion. I think November Rain, I know Axl would want to strangle me for this, is slightly overrated, a little long-winded. I love Slash's guitar work, but we can save that for the next album. And so Don't Cry would be my ballady other single you could put out there. Number seven.
By the way, you know that Don't Cry, You Could Be Mine, and November Rain were all holdovers from Appetite. Mm-hmm. And part of the reasoning for that was we had enough for Appetite. But the other part of the reasoning is you have a band, they maybe have 1 or 2 years of forming their initial material. They go in and they record it. There's an incredible sense of energy and excitement about, wow, now we're really going to get this stuff recorded and we're actually got a record deal. And that enthusiasm and energy is in that record. And then you get lucky. You get on a tour. And while you're on a tour, the record sells a little bit. So you get on another tour. And the next thing you know, you've been out there for about a year in buses and planes and shitty hotel rooms. And you come home, and the first thing the record company says is, need a new record, get in the studio now. And everybody is fucking worn out. Nobody has been through that learning curve or gone through the process of being on the road for a year. That takes it out of you. So there used to be a terminology back in the day, we used to call it the sophomore jinx, where somebody would come out with a great record, and then their second record would be, yeah, it's a little ho-hum, going through the motions. And that was usually the result of the fatigue of having to work that first record. And nobody had had a chance to do any writing. They hadn't been in clubs working the songs out. And that's why the second record, the follow-up record of a lot of bands, was weak. Mm-hmm. So being aware of that, we held over those 3 songs because at least I knew I had the beginnings of the spine of a second record that would be solid.
Absolutely.
And the irony, the fucking irony, what were the 3 singles that came off Illusions? Could Be Mine, Don't Cry, and November Rain.
November Rain.
All from the Appetite writing period.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I would say the fucking crime was that Dust and Bones wasn't a single. Because if ever there was a single on that record, it was Dust and the fucking Bones.
Again, I think it has everything that a GNR fan would want, especially it's just a hook-filled, catchy riff. It's just an awesome song. But picking up after my ballad, which was number 6 of Don't Cry, I finished it out with Bad Obsession, number 7, Locomotive, number 8, for some Slash guitar work that I really like in Locomotive. Double Chalk and Jive. Yes, Double Talk and Jive is another one that I think is underrated because Slash does some cool guitar stuff at the end of that one. And the
solo in that kicks in. That solo arrives.
And the outro flamenco type of guitar work is
Yeah.
awesome in that one as well.
That's kind of fun, but for me, with that song, it's that solo kicks in with an attitude and an energy and a vibe that's really present.
And then I wrapped up the album with what I think is the statement for me for Illusion, and that is Civil War. So that would be my 10.
Not bad. Almost
Thank
a
you.
passing. I'll give you a passing grade on that.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, Civil War. We can talk about that once we've gone through the lists.
Okay.
All right, Ruben, you're up to bat.
Ooh, look at this. I got okay. So I got 10. So I'll go with the first one. My if I was compiling this and sequencing it, I'd go with Bad Obsession. Start that off. I think really enjoy the tune, even going back to when I bought the cassette back in what 91 or whatever it was, right now. But mostly also, I think the Michael Monroe's harp playing really makes that tune. That and Slash's guitar playing. Number 2, You Could Be Mine. Again, that lots of great memories, with associated with the video. Schwarzenegger. It's just a fucking great song overall. Civil War. Again, another great one. And then I'd go with Yesterday's. And then this is where it gets a little bit kind of different, I think, from everybody else's list. I'd go with The Garden. I think I love that tune. Just that little part that Cooper plays in that's great. And then Garden of Eden following that. Right Next Door to Hell. Oh no, Pretty Tied Up, and then right Next Door to Hell is what I have. And then I'll go closing things out with Estranged and Coma. And those are just kind of those are only because I wasn't gonna stick in I wasn't gonna stick Knocking on Heaven's Door, although I do really enjoy that, and great memories watching them perform that live.
That was made for a fucking movie. That was made for a fucking movie.
Yeah.
Let me remember. It was a really bad Tom Cruise movie.
Was that Interview with a Vampire? Because they wound up doing the Stones cover for that.
Oh, that was even worse.
Yeah.
It was called Days of Thunder.
Oh yeah, they had
the race car
on there. Yeah.
The NASCAR movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I had a bit of a screaming match with Geffen about that, because he called up and he wanted an Appetite track for that movie. So you have to do your due diligence. And I called somebody over at Disney who would be straight with me, and I said, this Tom Cruise movie, is it any good? Because I'd already been bitten by this. The first time I got away with it, it worked out. It was a movie called The Deadpool, Clint Eastwood. And I get this phone call from Eddie Rosenblatt, president of Geffen. And he says, Eastwood wants a Guns N' Roses track for his movie. And I'm sitting there and going, Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, what can go wrong? This is going to be fucking awesome. Well, a movie stank. It was terrible. And there was my track in it. But the way it worked out is, in the movie industry, if a big name movie's coming out with a big star and it's a turkey, they television advertise it to death to get people in to see the movie before the word gets out that it sucks. So for a month before this movie came out, there was Guns N' Roses on everybody's television, right at a perfect time. This would have been early summer of '88, somewhere around there. So suddenly my band is nationwide on everybody's television, and it worked out. But I learned a lesson. It's find out if the movie's any good before you associate. And with Tom Cruise movie, the word I got back was, it sucks. Really? That's what people are saying about it. So I told David Geffen, sorry, no Appetite track for this. He went fucking ballistic. He was screaming and yelling down the telephone and so on. And I reciprocated. And part of the reason why I reciprocated the screaming and yelling at him, because I had a real bad case of flu at the time and was not in the mood to be a gentleman. But once the phone call was over, I felt really bad about it and did not feel good that we had ended up just yelling at each other. And the thought that went through my mind was, this is a guy who signed the band. This is a guy who let Tootout spend $365,000 fucking dollars on a debut record. No one does that, but David did. And he's the guy who took us to the dance. So we're obligated to leave the dance with him rather than someone else. So I called Axel and told him about the conversation, how I felt about it, and that I was feeling a bit bad about it. And it was Axel who said, well, why don't we cut him something else? And I went, that's a great idea. What do you got in mind? And Axel says, let's do Knocking on Heaven's Door. We're performing it live because, you know, in a memorial for Todd Crew, who died in New York with Slash. We've been playing Knocking on a Heaven's Door in his memory. He'd been working on the Crew for us at that time. So that's how we got to Knocking on Heaven's Door. And it was on a movie. And it shouldn't have been on this album.
Agreed.
Agreed. So that's yours, Ruben?
That was it. That was my list.
All right, now I'm going to tell you how to do it.
Oh,
Okay, first off, have you guys got any inkling of the fucking pressure
I'm sure.
that we all felt? How do you follow the response that Appetite got? How do you follow? The expectations are just insurmountable. There's virtually no way you can top Appetite. Doing 2 records is one part of the means of making it more of an event and making it exciting. But in terms of what's on the record, well, the first thing you're going to do is the first track up has got to have some energy, got to have some fucking attitude. And my first track is Double Talking Fucking Jive. You come in on those drums and that says, guess what, fuckers, we're back. And then when Slash's solo comes in on that track, that nails that statement of, we're here, this is working, sit back. And that is the only way that I think you can open the record, is on Double Talking Jive. One of the things I used to get the bands to do back in the day was, when you went on stage and played your first song, do not stop for the audience reaction. Count in 1, 2, and straight into your second song. Get a momentum going. Get a sledgehammer going. Kick their fucking asses. All right? So in doing this, in putting a playlist here, my second track is going to be Back Off Bitch.
Awesome.
And I'm going to do, and when the record's mastered, I'm not going to master the usual 2, 3, 4 beat into the next song. I'm going to do a cut of 1, 2 in top, so as it hits faster, like you do that live. You go Back Off Bitch. Then I'd go with my favorite track of the record, Dust and Bones. That is so pure Izzy. And in case you don't know, my attitude has always been that Izzy was the best writer. He embodied the rock and roll condition with an unimpeachable cool and style. His lyrics had an incredible street vernacular. And when he played rhythm guitar, he always knew where to leave the spaces and get the momentum and movement of the rhythm of the track really working. He was my number one writer in that band. So my third track is Dust and Bones. And by that time, those 1, 2, 3 tracks, I think we can breathe a little bit. I think at that point, those with high expectation, and those who are going, all right, show me what you're going to do after Appetite, they'd be sitting back and grooving. They'd be with us. So then I'd go to Yesterdays, start getting some commentary in there. After Yesterdays, I'm going to drop Civil War. And no one is going to see that coming. And it's coming at a point of the record where, okay, we've got our feet moving. Now we get something that gets our brains and our spirits moving as well. So Civil War would be after Yesterdays. To get out of Civil War, I've got to change vibe. We've got to change gear. So it's Pretty Tied Up. And from there, with a slight sense of humor after Pretty Tied Up, is obviously, you could be mine. Especially if you're pretty tied up. You could be mine. After that, because it would be unfucking avoidable, there would have to be one of those long, boring Axl songs that has to be on this record. Otherwise, he's going to fucking put a 22 bullet in my head. So I would go with Locomotive, because I think that's his strongest lyrical outing of Coma, Estranged, Locomotive. I think his lyrics on Locomotive are some of his best writing. Then, of course, there's the obligatory November Rain, which between you and me is really just a paint-by-numbers ballad, you know, and then you go and see the fucking video that you spent $1.25 million fucking dollars on. What was he thinking? And it clearly shows that I'm not on board, because part of my role was I represented 5 people, collectively known as Guns N' Roses. I did not sign a contract with one individual called Axl. All right. And here, November Rain, the video, it's all about Axl and Stephanie. It's not about the fucking band. Who knows? But November would be obligatory at the back end of the record. And for a little bit of cynicism, I'd close out with Dead Horse. Because we're beating one now.
Right. Yeah.
So that's my 10, guys.
Right. There's your 10.
Wow.
There's
Nice.
my 10. And I will tell you something else. I have only listened to this record all the way through on one occasion, and that was sitting with Tom Zutaut when we were going over all
Oh,
the mixes.
wow.
I've never been able to play it as a record since.
Tough.
Well, you know, it's kind of an emotional thing and
Sure.
an attitude thing. But if the ship is going down and all these tracks are floating around in the water, it would be a toss-up whether I'd grab Civil War or Dust and Bones. But I think I know I'd pick up Dust and Bones because I'm an Izzy guy.
Right.
Well, I definitely feel like the band lost something when there was no more Izzy. That's for sure.
They lost their best writer.
The riffage was the aggressive.
Yeah.
There was an edge to it that was present that Gilby Clarke and no one else could quite get.
No, Izzy was the best writer of them all. The other thing, the first crack was losing Stephen.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
we lost Stephen to things like Coma and Estranged and Locomotive because he couldn't play these fucking things the same way twice.
Yeah.
And we lost him because he lost himself. And Stephen is not the best drummer in the world. Technically, he is not brilliant. But he's the only one who's been in that band on the kit who had the enthusiasm love of being in that band that put a certain feel and energy into him, and he could swing. And every single drummer since then has not been able to swing. They're just thumpers. You know, it's just bashers at the back there. But Stevie could swing. And it was Duff. Duff used to be a drummer. And Duff spent a lot of time with him in Rumbo, when we were doing Appetite, bringing that out of him, getting him to swing. And that's why that record feels good, because he's really excited to be playing it. That energy is in his performance, and it swings.
And that definitely was lacking going forward for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I got a question though, there, Alan. Years ago, you know, and I even forgot the label, but I got a promo copy of a album. The band was the Outpatients, and I think they had Adler on there. They had Duff was making an appearance, and Slash. I think that was those three, and it was a one of those West Arkeen bands. What's your recollection of that? Because I think that was around the time, right around before or after Appetite.
I have no recollection of it, because I don't think I've even heard it or listened to it. But you bring up a name,
Right.
West Arkeen,
Right.
and there was a period of time when Izzy was going through really serious coke addiction. He was putting up tin foil on his windows because the government were coming through with magic beams to see what he was doing. He triple locked his door. If you knocked on his door, he got a Geiger counter out to check you. He was the personification of paranoia, and he was going through accounts, and he was having people deliver accountings, pizzas, and Peruvian powder. And it was a very, very scary and troubling period, because Izzy was not Izzy at that point. And at that point, West Arkeen was starting to worm his way deeper into Axl's orbit. My concern, unfortunately, it became Izzy's concern too, was that he started to worry that West Arkeen would move in and he'd be moved out. And that would have been a fucking disaster of the first order. But that was West Arkeen. That's what he was working for.
Right. Let me see. Well, what's your relationship with Izzy these days? I mean, is he keep in touch with you? I know he's kind of dropped out of sight. I don't know if you're still in touch with him.
No, we don't communicate. The last time I saw him was he actually drove all the way out here to Prescott and knocked on my door. So I had a bizarre moment. I was sitting in my living room reading a book and chewing on some nuts or something. And my wife's a Southern girl, and she was in a Daisy Dukes t-shirt that day and went to answer the door. And I hear this, "Hey, honey, Izzy Stradlin's at the door." And I'm sitting there going, what did she just fucking say? And I got up, and there was Izzy. And he was standing there, and he had a package in his hand. And he's going, "Does Alan live here?" You know, and that he stayed for a day and then went on to Sedona, and I haven't heard from him since.
Wow.
Right on.
In your opinion, Alan, most valuable player for a band, Izzy or Keith Richards?
Izzy or Keith Richards?
Yeah. If you had to pick.
Well, just by numbers and volume, you got to go with Keith. You know, because there are so many cool riffs that he's come up with that are just timeless. I mean, you know, Start Me Up's a ho-hum song. Who cares? What does it really say? But when that riff kicks in, you're with it and you go with it. And Keith, and the other thing is that I've got to go with Keith because Keith stayed the course. Keith actually took Slash out for dinner one night and gave him a big lecture about you have to stay with your singer. You cannot break up with your singer. And Slash is saying, but you don't know what we have to put up with Axl. And Keith looked at him and said, and what the fuck do you think I have to put up with fucking Mick Jagger? Keith's thing was, for better or for worse, it's a marriage, it's a sonic marriage that must be maintained, and it must be maintained for both the band and the audience.
Right.
So I have one photograph, music photograph in my living room, and it's of Keith and Ronnie and Izzy playing together in Atlantic City, because that to me is 3 chips off the same block of rock and roll marble. And that's the one thing I have in my living room that goes, yeah, I used to fuck around with bands.
Right. There you go. You guys have any questions? I got one. It's a dual one because it's a Jack Russell Don Dokken question because there's a tie-in here.
Right.
Alan's friends with both, and there's also the On Your Knees EP, which Great White, Jack Russell, Don Dokken had a part in that, I believe, right? Did he not? Yeah.
So,
But yeah, it was produced by Don and Michael Wagner engineered.
Right.
And Don talked me into using Michael and flying him in from Germany. And I found out later that Don was intending to do some recording with Michael. So basically I paid for Wags' flights for Don's benefit. But Don and Michael did that first EP. And then when we got signed to EMI, Wags put a real pressure on me saying, if you let Don produce the first Great White record, it's going to sound like Dawkins. Let me do it on my own. And I gave in to that pressure, and it was a mistake. And the results speak for themselves.
Right. One of the things over time, though, and this is a question just as a fan and somebody that attends shows and watches performances and stuff, similar to like athletes. I think I don't know if you're a football fan, American football fan, but I think you think of Joe Montana in his prime, playing for the 49ers. Then things start to erode a little bit, goes on to the Kansas City Chiefs and winds up getting whacked and pummeled. With these guys, over time, obviously some of that stuff that happens is due to their own excess and lifestyles and stuff. We saw that with Jack. But I think with Jack, I saw the guy, in the forest of physical state, but the voice was still there. You have Don, who's experienced health issues, and the voice is kind of leaving the guy. I mean, at that point, it's kind of tough listen for fans, I think.
Well, yeah, and it's also tough for Don because it's old aging. And he had his back really fucked up by some bad operations. If ever any of you guys think you've got problems with your back, do not let them operate on you because it's all downhill from there. I last saw Don in September when there was this Paramount Plus thing in LA that we had to go to. And Don and I went and sat on a quiet table together to catch up. And he pulled out his phone. And, people watching us were probably thinking we were talking about old times and stuff and,
Right.
Who we both had in a jacuzzi. But in point of fact, he had his phone out showing me his x-rays and the metal in his body and how fucked up he is. And of course, I had to say the obvious thing. your biggest health problem is metal fatigue. But he's not doing that well. And, you know, friend of mine for life, love him to death. But I will say that Don was not the greatest frontman. The biggest fucking mistake of Dawkins was when Cliff and Peter told Don he had to be a frontman and put down his guitar. He should never have put down his guitar. And of course, his guitar player, Lynch, oh my God. Lynch stories forever. But Lynch wanted to be the only guitar player. Big mistake. That band should always have been two guitars, and Don was a better frontman when he had a guitar around him. But just standing there and singing was not his strength. He was not that good at it. He wasn't a Jack. He certainly wasn't an Axl. He was a guitarist singer, and that's what he should have stayed doing.
Yeah.
Of course,
That's
a
a good assessment.
Well, it's just my fucking opinion. What the fuck
Right.
do I know? Nothing, ever.
Right, but that all that really does make sense, because if you watch Don, it's kind of like while he sings, he doesn't really know what else he's supposed to be doing with himself.
Well, that also brings up.
Andrew,
Yeah.
Andrew, have you ever seen, you remember that Monsters of Rock tour?
Yes, I saw it.
Van Halen, Metallica, Don. Have you ever seen any of the film of it?
Yes.
They're fucking terrible.
Yep.
They are not a band. They're not cohesive. They're not working together. They're not playing that well. And part of that was, again, not a brilliant management move, because the same managers were there for Metallica and Don. Dawkins had to go on after Metallica. Are you fucking kidding me? No one wants to go on after Metallica. Don should have played before Metallica. That would have been a safer place. He'd have got the audience a little fresher. That'd have been fine. But to go on after Metallica, it's like, that's a total no-win situation.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what happened when Guns N' Roses and Metallica toured. You know, they had to sit in a fucking dressing room for 2 hours to wait for all the energy to totally die after Metallica had played before GNR would go on. You know, it's no wonder that was going to be a disaster. I knew that was going to be a fucking disaster from the moment it came out of Lars's mouth. We were in Duff's house in his bathroom. God knows what we were all doing in the bathroom. But Lars turns around and says, "Oh," to Duff, "let's tour together." I nearly had a fucking coronary right then and there. And in point of fact, Lars and I left at the same time. And in that awful early morning light where you just want to be somewhere dark, I'm driving Lars back to his hotel, and running through my head is, "You little cocksucker, I am going to take you straight down to the sheriff's station and drop you off so they can bust you, because this should not happen. This is going to be a disaster."
Wow.
I should have done it.
Yeah, you should have done it. I'm thinking a couple things here, Alan. I think part of it is I know Don for a while was doing a lot of the air drumming, and I thought, where's that coming from? I think that you nailed it as far as the uncomfortableness of not having a guitar strapped on, you know, because he doesn't have anything to do with his hands, right?
Totally. And let's just take one more consideration. Where do those fucking Dawkins songs come from? They come from Don sitting in his bedroom with his fucking guitar and his little 4-track. Before his solo record, I used to have to drive right past his house on my way home from the office. And time and again, I'd stop at the house, just stick my head in, say hi, and see if he had something to play. And, you know, over a stretch of a couple of months, I'm looking at him and saying, "You're good. This is a good Dawkins record. You're fine." And then, of course, he gets in the studio and fucking Lynch has to be the guitar player, you know. But these are all songs that are constructed by Don with his own guitar, and he was obviously a decent player and good at constructing songs and good at arranging. He should never have given the guitar up, you know. And then with Lynch, Lynch comes in high, and he plays a solo, then he plays another solo, then he plays another solo. I mean, I listen to Lynch solos on the radio, and I go, "What the fuck was he thinking? This does not fit the song," you know. And as Don will tell you, once Lynch left, he and Michael had to sit there and take this part of this solo, this part of this solo, this bit of this solo, that bit, and comp a solo together that was usable.
Nice.
Early on, there was this young guitar player that Don really wanted to have in the band instead of Lynch. He was so young at the time that when we went to Denny's in the Valley, Don asked me to go with him and go to this meeting with him. We sat with this kid, and he was so young, he was nervous about ordering. He was that inexperienced.
Wait a minute. Are you saying he didn't know whether he should order from the kids menu or the adult menu? How old was this guy?
He was in his teens, and that was Warren
Wow.
DiMartini.
Yep,
Right.
I've heard.
Yeah, Don wanted Warren in Dorkin, and Warren decided he was going to stay with Rat, which meant that he went back to Lynch. Don's best band, and the timing was really bad. But do you know a track called Mirror Mirror?
Yeah, the solo album. We talked about that a few weeks back. Yeah,
That was the best Dorkin band.
that was a great lineup.
That was a great lineup. They all looked terrific together. They grooved together. They felt right together. There was a chemistry there. I just don't understand why that didn't go better.
And the lyrics are really deep on that album.
Don can write a decent lyric, you know? And at the end of the day, I mean, if you don't have a decent lyric, you got fucking musical wallpaper, you know? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get a meeting of minds. At its best, rock and roll suspends alienation, and this is the point, it brings people together by own consent. Our lives are coercive. There are state laws, there's regional laws, there's religious laws, there's pressure from family, there's pressure from your social group. We all negotiate through a coercive environment. But when you pick up a guitar, Andrew, and you play me a song, and I recognize the spirit and the intelligence in that song, then it's a willing bridge of humanity that forms between us, because I recognize you and you recognize me. You know, so you got to have a good fucking lyric.
Yep.
At the end of the day, that's what you need.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you need Izzy with his grooves, and then you need Slash with his sense of eloquence and expression. You know, you build it up, and of course, also with the drummer. If you don't have a good drummer,
Yeah.
you're a non-starter.
So on that note, Alan, what is your take on the recent swap from Frank to the new guy?
I have no take on it whatsoever. Frank had been there for what, 20 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's
Long
their-
time.
19, all right. Was it 19? Something. Yeah, but long enough.
And I'm sure Frank must be a really good guy to survive in that environment for 20 years. It's 14, 15 longer than I survived. But my initial take on Frank was the same take as I had on what's his fucking name that replaced Steve?
Matt Sorum.
Matt Sorum. Heavy-handed, hands like concrete. All right. And these are songs that require a little bit more skill, because you've got to get dynamic within the way the drums are played to really get these songs across the way they should be got across. And for me, Matt was just a thumper, and his replacement didn't seem much better. Axl needs somebody who can swing.
Right. Well,
I
you
think
guys
that
have
this
it.
new gentleman is coming from Duff's solo
Solo
band,
band.
Loaded, and so my guess is that Duff is having some say in who's taking over the drum slot there to hold on
Yeah.
that rhythm section.
Yeah, that all seems logical.
Yeah.
It all seems logical. But, you know, my question is, and all power to anyone and everyone who can actually go out and fill a venue and play music for people's pleasure when you're in your 50s, your 60s, and your 70s.
Raise your horns high, let your